Okay, now the time for case building is up. Before I start the debate, I would like to ask all participants to turn on your camera. If you don't have any connection or other problems, thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Right. I'll just do a quick roll call, like right now. Government team that's present.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Opposition team, are you present?
I guess we're here.
Cool. Two edges, Leon and Matthew. You guys here?
I'm here.
Okay, I'm not going. Oh, thank you. That means that everyone's here. Leon, I think you're here, right?
Sorry, what? Can you repeat that?
No, I'm just saying, you're present, right?
Oh yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm not going to take much time. You guys all know the motion. The motion reads: this house would destroy the device. Before I give it to the moderator, a few ground rules. Default POI preference, the default POI method would be through chat. If you want other methods, please do verbally say it in front of the speech before you start. Like, I prefer verbal POI so that other teammates would understand. Secondly, do state your gender preferred pronoun. If it's non-stated, every member of this debate must understand that the default would use the speaker position. So refer the other speakers to their speaker positions: Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and etc. I think that would be it from me. The rest of the proceedings would be led by the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, once again, to all participants, if you don't have any connection or other problems, I would like to ask all of you to turn on your camera, please. All right. Welcome to the Grand Final round of MEDEBATE 2022. My name is Muhammad Rafa Sayoka as the chairperson, and my partner here, Muhammad Arkan Ramadan, as the timekeeper for this round. The chair adjudicator is Mr. Hagata Airsada Ginting. Next to the chief adjudicator are Ms. Eugenia Leoneta and Mr. Matthew Cotham. All the judges' decisions are final and individual marks will not be disclosed. The government team is from Team B with Ms. Annette Claudia Keiko acting as the first speaker from Universitas Gadjah Mada. Miss Kelly Laurencia Hadi as the second speaker, and Miss Eugenia Junita as the third speaker. The reply speech will be brought by Miss Kelly Laurencia Hadi. The opposition team is from Team A with Miss Andrea Valerie Manik as the first speaker from Universitas Airlangga, Miss Sydney Chandra as the second speaker from Universitas Indonesia, and Mr. Brian Arianto Tanuwijaya as the third speaker from Universitas Gadjah Mada. The reply speech will be brought by Miss Sydney Chandra. I'm going to read the rules of this debate competition. The first one is the timekeeper will ring the bell once after the first minute, indicating that POIs are allowed. On the 6th minute, the bell will ring once, indicating that no more POIs are allowed. The bell will ring twice on the 7th minute, and after 7 minutes and 20 seconds, the bell will ring continuously, indicating that time is over. The second one is during the reply speech, the bell will ring once in the first minute and twice in the 4th minute. It will ring continuously after 4 minutes and 20 seconds, indicating that time is over. No POIs are allowed during the reply speech. Reminder to the observers, you are not allowed to make any noises during the speech nor help the participants. And for the participant of each team, how do you like to present your POIs?
I think government team would like to take verbal POIs.
Same for opposition. We will also take for the verbal POI. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Both teams agree to verbal POIs. For Mr. Arkan, can you start the stopwatch share screen, please? Okay, the motion we are debating today is this House will destroy the device that can actively rewrite a human being's genetic structure, with Team B as the government team and Team A as the opposition team. To open the debate, I will call upon the first speaker of the government team. Ms. Keiko, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So as mentioned, I will take verbal POIs and my preferred pronouns is she or her. Why is the timer starting? I've not yet started my speech. So if the committee can please just reset that. Okay, thank you. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this House would destroy the device, as mentioned in the context slide, right? So what do we want under our side of the House? We want what status quo has right now, right? We understand right now there's currently a lot of continuous research on how, for example, to make prosthetic limbs, how it can actually replicate closely to what the human body have, how we can have new methods of transplantation and so forth. Look, in our world right now, there's already a lot of research and development going on, right? The government has already also incentivized everyone to actually do research. For example, how if you want to graduate from college, you have to do like your thesis. If you want to be a doctor, a doctorate of philosophy, you have to do research, right? So there's already a lot of incentive for research. And this research is better inherently on our side. Why? Because it is regulated by the government. There are clear regulations and transparency on this, right? For example, like the antiretroviral that is used in the vaccines right now, right? So in my speech, I will give you two argumentation. Firstly, on the how the doctor has the obligation to destroy the device. And secondly, how because of the limitation of this device, it will create and it will harm society more in general, right? But firstly, talking on a principle level on why the doctor have the obligation to destroy. First of all, please understand that this device is being given to you by an alien, in which you do not know the alien, you don't know what his or her intentions are, there is no accountability. But understand, principally, the method of treatment can only be given to patients if it has already been proved. Why so? For example, how there's a lot of like 4 steps clinical trial. It is divided into a lot of phases. For example, you need to test on animal first before on humans. And after you test on humans, there's still an observation phase and see if there are other like adverse effects or side effects after a few months or even years. This is why clinical trials sometimes take a while, right? But we think that it's okay and it's still better on our side if we have clinical trials. Why? Because at least we know the adverse effects, there's accountability there, and at the end of the day, clinical trials by humans are again more reproducible. It is more, it can be replicated, which will actually extend in my second argument, right? But so understand that as a doctor, you cannot give this unproven method of treatment to patients, even those with rare diseases or rare diseases, right? It's like, for example, a company is saying to you that, okay, this drug's work, but you wouldn't just like give the drug to the patients, right? Okay, and secondly, why we think that this will actually be a problem, right? Understand the context is you're an average doctor in an average hospital, right? Assuming that you are really truly altruistic, we can assume you will do it for good. But most of the time, when you're average, you know that maybe you're not as privileged as other friends who have parents for doctors so they can learn more. You are not as smart as your peers. So what would you do at this moment, right? You would have sort of like a malicious intent to monopolize it to skyrocket your career, for example. You will treat patients using this to gain your name. But even if that's like from the doctors itself, right? But secondly, what we think would be dangerous when this device is being tested, right? The moment people know about this device and what it can do, there will be a lot of other characters that will actually go after it. For example, what? Like big pharmaceutical companies or big medical industries, for example. Firstly, they will approach this average doctor in a formal way in order to try to buy it from you, right? So consciously or subconsciously as a human, you would actually be very enticed to take this deal because again, you're average. And nobody wants to be average. Like you want to be a doctor who a lot of people know of, who your success rate is actually very good, right? And as a person, opposition cannot guarantee that you will not fall to the trap, right? That is their burden. But secondly, secondly, when the doctor, let's say you're really good and you refuse to take the offer from these big companies, right? Op cannot argue that these big companies will not actually try to do like illegal ways to get it, right? I know it sounds like an action movie, but we think that this is actually really possible, right? When there is this device that could, like it's that regrow limbs and actually cure genetic disease, right? They would actually want to buy you out, I don't know, like hire assassins to go after you, raid your house, search for your device, and so forth. And because you're just average, you don't have the power that these big companies have, right? Op cannot guarantee that they can protect this device in their hands fully, right? And we think, how is this harmful when it falls into the hands of a wrong person, like these big pharmaceutical companies? They're going to exploit and monopolize it, for example, because this is the only device that they have and it is not replicated because we don't know the technology. It's given to us by aliens. They're going to sell it in a very high price. So therefore, they can get money from rich people, for example. And then once they realize that, okay, I can sell this to rich people, I get a lot of income. Therefore, they won't have any incentive to actually create a cure for or generic drugs that actually does not pay off that well enough, and it takes a lot of manpower, right? So we think that they will actually just go to this and stop making those things. And at the end of the day, who will be resulted from this is actually poor people who are struggling, like who will not be able to pay for this treatment by these pharma companies that they want to use the device because they don't have the money. So any of the day, the community are actually just going to be struggling and at the worst case being left to die, right? Okay, so under best case, understand how I explained to you, under best case scenario, the doctor is actually good, right? But remind you, and this is also going integrated to my second argument, there is only one device, right? Okay, so once you use it, not a lot of people can actually use it, right? You cannot cure a lot of people at the exact same time. There's going to be lines for this. And for example, this device right now exists in Indonesia. People from like South Africa who are, let's say, have lower income, they cannot just like go up on a plane, pay for their stay and go to another country to just cure, right? We think that that's dangerous. But secondly, how this limitation will harm society in general. Obviously, I've mentioned before this characterization, this device will later can only be used by rich people, right? And how is the harm to rich people who have finally have the answer for their kids' diseases, who are actually experiencing, for example, like rare disease? They will actually have no incentive to further the research right now and have trials to cure rare disease, right? Because why would they care to pay for this child that can actually at the end of the day benefit a lot of people, society, even those who are poor, because yeah, they already got the answer, right? So what about the poor? They will be marginalized, right? But secondly, it's also dangerous how this device can actually change your race, weight, and height, right? So it's basically like designer babies. It will make the notion that if you don't like your race, weight, or height, you can just change it. That is not the narrative we want. We want for people to actually embrace diversity, right? So again, if this is booming, the whole would know. So you're not embracing diversity, and a certain race and weight will be overgird certain standard, and people will see, oh my gosh, if like the rich are choosing, for example, to be light skin rather than dark skin, then maybe light skin is actually the best. And people would, what's the impact to society on this when you're constantly being embedded this idea, right? Poor people who are actually construct to live in the society, they will try to pay for this, but I don't yeah, so by those all of those points, I think that is actually very harmful, and is how this is proud to propose. Thank you.
The first speaker of the government team spent 7 minutes and 28 seconds. To resume the debate, I would like to call upon the first speaker of the opposition team, Ms. Andrea. Time is yours.
Okay, before I start my speech, I just want to clarify that I prefer verbal POIs because I won't be looking at the chat. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3. Wait. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The moment you are born into this world, you're not given the opportunity to rearrange your chromosomes. There are so many people who are born every year with genetic diseases, which end up preventing them from living the most fulfilling lives they can as normal human beings. This looks like people being born with Down syndrome, Turner syndrome, and so many more genetic problems that are happening in the status quo, right? Just one wrong chromosome. It doesn't even have to be like a full chromosome. It can only be a small part of it. Like one defect and its Q arm or its P arm defines what you end up being as a human being. We strongly believe that if there is something that can cure this, we have to share it with the world. Our goal inside opposition is for the betterment of society and alleviating these poor people who have suffered for too long, right? So one clarification before moving on to my rebuttals and arguments, right? We say that in their whole premise about clinical trials, it will not be exclusive to their side of the house, because there can also still be clinical trials with this device. So their whole first argument and their whole premise in this regard doesn't even make any sense, right? So moving on to my rebuttals. First of all, on how research already exists in the status quo, right? And that's why it's enough. 2 responses to this. First of all, we don't understand why government side of the house wants to be satisfied with current medicine, right? We still see a lot of people dying because of cancer. We still see anencephalic babies born. We still see a lot of people being born and subject to live lives that it wasn't their fault. They didn't choose to. And because of that, and still a lot of people are still suffering those conditions, and no, current research is not sufficient, right? But secondly, right, current research is slow because we are not as extraterrestrial as this device. Our technology is still very limited. We don't know how many years it will take to reach this level of being able to cure so many other patients. We don't think it's worth it to destroy this device, right? But second rebuttal, right, about how they say that doctors have the obligation to destroy this device, right? This is clearly logically flawed, because no, doctors have the obligation to help people. This is their main obligation. So if you're giving the opportunity to help such a big problem in society, it goes against your moral compass and your moral obligation to help people. So obviously this premise in itself is already wrong, right? So moving on to my arguments. But before that, what will happen under our side of the house? What will happen under opposition side of the house, right? First of all, we will spread this device and share it with the world through responsible international organizations. So this device will be widespread, right? But more than that, we won't exclusively hand it to an international organization. We will first publicize the existence of this device to the public, so they will know that it exists, right? Using like social media, going on TV, interviews, etc., right? And before that, also, a characterization about your average doctor, right? An average doctor means that you went through medical school, you have learned bioethics, etc. So you don't have to be like a brilliant doctor to have a good moral compass and a large moral obligation. We think that in itself, it's inherent on every single doctor to have this moral obligation, right? This means that at the end of the day, it's most likely that you won't misuse this for your own personal benefit, because you're already trained. You already serve patients. You already know that what you're supposed to do as a doctor is to help society. Moving on to my arguments. First argument, right? right? We have to understand that the urgency in the status quo, right? Genetic diseases are prevalent everywhere, affecting people's lives, not being able to function. And this is very harmful, right? We think that the fact that some people are born this way is very unfair. That is birth lottery, right? What does this look like, right? Some examples. Firstly, some babies are born deaf, which means that their whole life they end up not being able to listen to the voices of people around them. They can't drive cars, they can't study normally, they can't live normally, right? Or some babies are born anencephalic, which means they are born without a brain. They are born inherently to die just after several days, right? Or some others are born with chromosomal defects that structurally push them to not be able to function, forced to enroll in different kinds of schools. They are forced to be burdens for their families their entire lives, right? And there are also some people who experience like car accidents, losing their arms because of a drunk driver. Is it really their fault? This means they have to spend their whole life in therapy, which scarring themselves mentally and physically. They cannot live their lives even though it's not their fault, right? But secondly, right, current medical advances have not been able to solve all of these problems. What current medical dictates is that you have to be satisfied with suboptimal living. Like, for example, when you have a limb off, you must get rehab your whole entire life with your remaining limbs. You won't have your original life with like full hands or your full legs back. Worse, if you're like quadriplegic, you are forced to rely on another person for your whole entire life. Or like, for example, with genetic diseases, right? If you have Down syndrome, all you get is probably therapy and comfort on how to adapt to the world, but you are inherently still different with the others. You are genetically wired to think differently. You don't solve the root of the problem that we have to tackle, right? So when you have the power to reverse these diseases, we don't think it's justified for you to refuse that. Like, for example, when you know that antiretroviral drugs can help people with HIV, then not giving the drug to an HIV patient is inherently against bioethics because you could have saved a life you could save, right? This goes against what you've learned as a medical worker in the first place. Our premise is that basically, if you have the capacity to help, you are obligated to help. But even if some of the patients are not cured by this machine, for example, because of accessibility and feasibility hindrances that government brings up, right? The existence of this machine alone is good for these people. It's good for society because you provide them with the hope that there is a fix to their conditions, that their lives is still worth living, and they can look forward to a future where they are better off rather than in their current conditions. But moving on to my second argument, right? First of all, what's most likely to happen that as an average doctor that I've already explained, characterized before, that you know your limitations, but at the same time, we've already characterized you. You already went through medical school, you learned bioethics, you want to help people, right? So what will happen is that you will share this device to an international organization, which means that it will be widespread, right? And we think that international bodies will use this for the greater good because, first of all, the check and balance exists on our side because the public knows if it's not used to its potential or for the greater good, there will be public outrage demanding its use, especially because there are no other alternatives for the diseases it can cure right now in the status quo, right? But secondly, genetical issues are such a big problem, especially in the status quo. We think that the moment there is a cure towards these problems, it will be immediately put into use because at the end of the day, the goal of such international organizations is to cure as many people as possible. So they will make policies to act like it. We don't think it will end up like a designer baby dystopia because you need ethical clearance to use this device, right? But secondly, right, the benefits that you can get under our side of the house. Firstly, you will be able to become cured from your diseases. You will be able to people will get the opportunity to live normally like other people, not being isolated and limited by the condition in which you can't do anything at all in the status quo, right? But secondly, right, innovations come from other innovations, right? We think that this will be a very good addition to medicine and research in general because the reason why there hasn't been any solution towards genetic problems, especially, is because we are still lacking. With this device, it can cause breakthroughs in a lot of medical sectors, and therefore research and innovation will be better under our side of the house. So we believe that in the future, there will be more research breakthroughs regarding this, even though there's only one device currently, right? Any breakthrough is inherently inaccessible at first, but it's still a process of its dissemination. But there will be inherently pushed to make this accessible. Hence, research to replicate this machine and make it cheap will be much likely under our side of the house. Only on our side will people be able to cure from their diseases. Only our side will make it fair for those who never chose to suffer their whole lives. Very proud to oppose.
The first speaker of the opposition team spent 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, to continue the case of the government team, I would like to call upon the second speaker of the government team. Ms. Kelly, time is yours.
Okay. Please give me a verbal VOIs because I cannot really see if you chat me or raise your hand. So yeah. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, understand that it needs certain birth lottery for people to be able to afford and access this particular treatment. There is only one device. Imagine one device to serve the whole world with, I don't know, billions of people in it, ladies and gentlemen, each with their own diseases to cure, each with their own demands to, change their race, to change their weight, their height, without that you can actually provide the kind of accessibility they're talking about to everyone who really needs it, ladies and gentlemen. That is why I know this seems like an instant solution, but under our side of the house, we provide to you clinical trials and research that, yes, might take longer time, but the result will be affordable and accessible to everyone, and is able to be replicated, right? Compared to their side of the house, we're talking about alien technologies. We don't know what made up this device. There's no possibility to actually recreate this, so on and so forth. I think it is dangerous to create a device that can only be accessed by very, very limited scope of people. But furthermore, right, our first speaker has also extensively talked to you about the social impact of this particular device. Understand that this doesn't only cure disease, but also help you change your race, weight, and height, right? Which means there will be social implications in which it will embed a certain superiority towards a more wanted height and weight, right? We don't want this kind of social stigma to continue to circulate among the society. Hence, it will also be my substantive material. But moving on, right? 2 points of clarification. Firstly, when they want to talk about clinical trial, right? They cannot just undermine the fact that in the current days, we have to undergo clinical trial for every treatment that is given to the society, right? And that means we have to ensure that even if it is effective, there might be an adverse effect. For example, yes, if you remove a certain gene, maybe the genetic defect is cured, but you don't know what protein that gene encode. It could encode the protein that helps you breathe, the protein that produces glucose for your body, for example. You don't know exactly what kind of adverse effect, and therefore clinical trial is necessary, right? However, if they want to say that, okay, we're going to still do clinical trials, this is when there would be a security problem for them to worry about, right? Because this would mean that the clinical trial will expose this device to everyone, to big pharma companies, to big medical hospital that would want to literally take away this particular device, right? And hence, we think that one average doctor couldn't possibly protect this device from all the security problems. We see today there is so many hospitals or so many medical industries stealing patents from researchers, for example. How can they do this, ladies and gentlemen? Because they have very good lawyers. They can actually force this doctor into complying to what they want. And we think that one average doctor couldn't possibly face the force of the whole army of big pharma companies, of lawyers, or probably paid assassins and paid kidnappers that will do anything in their power to take this powerful tool and exploit it the best possible way they could, right? But secondly, right, when I want to talk how this would incentivize innovation, I do not see a clear step-by-step as it is explained in like the 7 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. They just say this would give incentive, right? On our side of the house, we give you a more clear step-by-step, right? The moment when there is no devices like this, there will be a lot of rich people who probably want to cure certain disease for their father, mother, or child, right? These rich people has the incentive and capital to be able to sponsor this research and this innovation, to sponsor this doctor, right? That is the moment this doctor will be able and will have the incentive to actually create innovation and clinical trial. For example, drugs that can later be replicated not only for the son or daughters of the rich people, but also for the general public, right? This is why innovation is indeed better on our side of the house. But furthermore, right, let's talk about the characterization of the doctor. They want to say that this average doctor will definitely have a good moral standings, right? First of all, we say that as an average doctor, you don't want to be average, ladies and gentlemen. You don't go to 4 years of medical school just to be average. You want to be the chief of the hospital. You want to win awards. You want to be rich, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why, consciously or subconsciously, you are likely to succumb to, for example, big pharma companies offering you a load of money, or for example, hospital offering you to be a career advancement to become the chief of the hospital. Most doctors will likely to succumb to this, right, ladies and gentlemen, because inherently you would want this. This is not the kind of opportunity you get unless this is the kind of opportunity the gold ticket that you don't get unless you actually sell this to them, right? And that is why sometimes doctors, consciously or subconsciously, or maybe out of their love for their family, because they want to ensure that the family can eat and live a good life, they will actually succumb to this offer. And this is dangerous because later these companies will only exploit it and actually give it to the rich people, right? But furthermore, on the comparison of their side of the house, right? When they want to say that this device will not be limited under their side of the house, they fail to actually consider things that would make this device limited, right? Firstly, the transport fee. Look, this doctor is located in one hospital in one country. Let's say Indonesia. What about people in South Africa who wants to access this? Not all people in South Africa is rich and can afford the plane ticket to Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen. This is the moment where it will be very limited for people who doesn't have the capital means to actually access this, right? But furthermore, also about the time, right, ladies and gentlemen, not all sick people can be transported in time from Africa to Indonesia, for example, and get this treatment. Comparatively, under our side, the drug we're talking about will be replicated into thousands, into billions, and can be sent all over the world and used by anyone in time, right when they need it. But furthermore, right, I also want to talk about how they would have a suboptimal life with this disease. Firstly, we have talked to you about research that has currently been able to improve the life of someone, right? We have prosthetic arms, prosthetic limb. We have better chemotherapy right now. We have targeted therapy, so on and so forth, that help them live a comfortable life. We even have all kinds of transplant this day, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, to say that they would live a sad life because they have a certain genetic defect or a certain, for example, no limbs, for example. I think that is very evil for them to say that, right? Because I think that just because someone has a disability doesn't mean they cannot live a good life, right? Nick Fujisik, for example, he became a motivator and go around the world motivating other people. I think this can be done. I think this can be done because this is an inherent coping mechanism from the person themselves. They adapt and they learn to make the best out of it. I think it's very evil for them to say that, right? But even if we may have to sacrifice them and they may have to die, for example, some of them, we think that it's okay because that is a natural course. But secondly, under a utilitarian principle, it's okay, right? Because at the end of the day, we would actually incentivize research and innovation that is good for the greater good. And lastly, it's also the protection of the most vulnerable society, which is the poor people. Because anyway, today, the rich people who can access this technology is already accessing the best treatment out there. They're already getting what they need. There is not much different, ladies and gentlemen. What we need is for us to protect the poor, to ensure we make medicines that can help them. But lastly, right, moving on to my substantive material, how this would backlash the progressive movement of acceptance of all kind of race, weight, and height, because there would be bad stigma, right? When you see many people, for example, doing plastic surgery in Korea, that is the moment you see that, okay, if you have smaller nose, that is better. And that is the same. If you have, for example, lower weight, skinnier, it will be better because there is a lot of influencer and celebrity probably using this and spreading the message to the world. But secondly, right, those who can afford it, their community, do not further marginalize them by doing and accessing this particular technology. Hence, it is better to destroy it in the first place. Very proud to oppose.
The second speaker of the government team spent 7 minutes and 27 seconds. Next, to continue the case of the opposition team, I would like to call upon the second speaker of the opposition team. Ms. Sydney, time is yours.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are, Miss.
Okay, my prayer preference is you just unmute yourself because I won't be seeing the chat box. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judges, imagine seeing your next patient suffering from their Klinefelter disease, knowing you used to be able to solve their disease with this alien device, but that device has been destroyed. This is exactly the kind of exasperation that we have explained to you in our justification, right? Because there are diseases that we currently do not have cures to. There are genetic defects that we currently cannot solve. Those are the root problems that we cannot solve. And we told you that our justification is that the moment you have a way to solve something, but you do not solve it, and you even destroy that device, then you are inherently breaching that kind of bioethics, right? You are not being able to bring out that benefit to that certain patient. But then we have to understand that in this debate, the device will be perfect, right? So we don't understand why government suddenly talks about the risk it brings. We think that this is kind of a fight, but later on we're going to explain to you why these dangers are unlikely to happen. On my first rebuttal on career advancements, right? We think that we told you that doctors inherently do not have malicious intent. We told you how those kinds of trainings are still inherent, and we think that doctors are, your average doctor is inherently altruistic. But more importantly, right, we think that the average doctor already has seen patients throughout their career. This means that they have seen how severe a genetic defect or a certain condition can bring one's life to. But then we already gave you on what will happen under our side is that we will share this with the world and to international organizations. If it gives you benefit, then that's good. But at the end of the day, you won't be so malicious because there is that kind of check and balance. We're going to publicize this device because we think that this device brings benefits. We are going to propagate it, right? Moving on, we think that we don't see how by destroying this device, we will be able to, yes?
What do you say about doctors who have gone through medical school, but they're still selling drugs that out of like to get bonuses from pharma companies, or those who actually indulge in malpractices? If they're so
we think that exactly this motion is about the average doctor. Those kind of doctors are outliers, right? We don't think you can stand on that argument, assuming that your doctor is that malicious, right? We think that the average doctor still wants the best for their patient. Hence, we think it's beneficial that you still keep this device. Moving on to my rebuttals. Two large rebuttals, right? First rebuttal on accessibility. We think that what's likely to happen is that you will make it accessible, right? Andrea has already told you how this will perpetuate further research and innovation, because innovation comes from innovation. If you want solutions to problems like genetic and etc., what government tries to tell you is that current research is enough. But the fact that we still do not have a cure for cancer, the fact that that some people born with anencephalic bodies still die after several days is already enough evidence that current medicine is not enough. And when you receive a new kind of innovation that you are new to, how you react to it is not by saying, oh, this is dangerous, hence let's abandon this, right? Because at one point, it's much better for you to try to research that kind of new thing and make it beneficial. But then, moreover, we think that this will become accessible because this is what happens with any single drug that you know, right? Because every single new innovation is inherently inaccessible. We want to normalize that. At the end of the day, exactly because a certain drug is inaccessible, but it brings new benefits, then you will encourage research to make that drug accessible, to make that drug cheap. That is the kind of breakthrough we need. But then even if accessibility will be slow, at the end of the day, you will still save certain patients who can access these kinds of treatments, right? We think that's okay. But then second response on accessibility, how they say geographical challenges can be a problem, right? We think that geographical challenges can be true for any type of machine. When the ECG, for example, was first made, we don't think it exists in all countries. It's first made in a certain city. But then we don't think that when you are able to see heart rhythms and be able to predict a disease, you're going to say that, oh, we are going to keep this in the city, right? When you see that kind of machine, how medicine responds to it is by trying to replicate this kind of technology so you can make it accessible. So inherently, we don't think geographical challenges is a valid argument, because inherently there will be always efforts to make this geographically accessible. But then they try to tell you that it's dangerous to recreate devices you don't know. What current research looks like is also like that. You never know what some kind of beta protein that has never been researched will do in a human body. You need to embrace the unknown in research, and hence you need to embrace this new alien device, right? Because we will push for research for it, because this will be a new medical advancement, because you never know how many years will it take for human research to be able to reach this kind of extraterrestrial technology. That is why we think that even in the worst case, even if it is impossible for you to make this fully accessible, it's still justified, because at least you will push research to reach this kind of technology. At least you will have, no thank you, at least you will meet efforts to make it safe and to make it best, right? Second of all, about their premise about how this will be some kind of designer baby dystopia, about how this will rule out race and differences in differences in height, for etc. Right? Government side of the house tries to romanticize that you can be motivational if when even if you are quadriplegic. But what they don't know is that the reality for most quadriplegics is that they live a miserable life. They live a life that is inherently not independent. They need to be reliant to a certain somebody, right? Those kinds of stories you see, like Nick Fujovic, etc., are only outliers. We don't think if they really care about a utilitarian point of view, we don't think that kind of view is valid, because you only see those on top. You don't see the majority of people who are suffering. But then we also told you that this is not going to happen, right? Because under the mechanism in which you propagate a device, there will be regulations from upper bodies, like international bodies, to rule out misuse. So if we can prove to you, we can create a line between what is medical and what is additional, then we think it's okay, right? We think that there will be parameters that you can only use these things for things that are medical things, right? Things like you cannot function. But then even if at the end of the day we end up as a designer baby dystopia, government side of the house needs to prove why that is bad. We think that when you champion quality of life and delete the conditions that you push, we still push better human conditions overall. Very proud to oppose.
The second speaker of the opposition team spent 7 minutes and 35 seconds. To close the case of the government team, I would like to call upon the third speaker of the government team. Ms. Junita, time is yours.
Wait, I'm still setting my papers. I prefer verbal POIs, and I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. They say that there will be check and balance on their side. We say that it's not going to be true because, first of all, only poor people that's going to go protesting about the inaccessibility of this machine. They do not have that much leverage. They do not have political supporters, and so on and so forth. Secondly, they will be silenced by rich people who can take the benefit of this machine. So we say under their side, monopoly is going to be worse. In this debate, I'm going to divide it into two topics, which is about the mechanism of the motion and whether or not there will be innovation further in the future. Now, first, I'm going to talk about how they say that they will make the government share the technology to other countries, how they will give it to health organization in the world. We say that it's not true. I have two responses for this. In a scenario where the doctor is bad, he or she will sell it to pharma companies for a huge amount of money and monopolize the world, which is very, very bad, because it's going to create a god complex of this doctor, because he or she can request as much money as they want, right? And secondly, if the doctor is good, it's not going to cater all needs of the society, because the device is only one, and you're talking about the whole world. There are 7 billion people in the world. How are you going to cater them? It's going to take how much? A century, which means that the people who are sick is already dead. Secondly, we also talk to you about security concern, how it can fall to evil people or businessmen who want profit, because there is only one in this world. And thirdly, we say that
most likely the device will go to the government, which is even more biased since it is a device from another planet and you don't have the permission for it. Like how meteorite that falls into Earth are taken by the government or NASA. So they will keep it and not share it with other countries because they do not have the obligation to share it with other countries, right? Because even the request from their own country is very, very high. And you see that the government doesn't care about other countries. They do not care about they only care about their press, about how their images to their photos, right? So if they help others when their own country is in chaos because healthcare are not there, it's going to be very, very bad. And secondly, this is like when you have oil in your country, like which is found in a certain country. You know how valuable oil is, right? Will you share it to other countries for free? No, right? You're going to raise the price because it is only exclusive in your country. Now, moreover, the government have a lot of feuds and enemies from other countries, right? So it's not going to be fair under their side. Now, moving on toward that's about the mechanism. Now, moving on toward my second rebuttal, talking about birth lottery. We do admit that in the status quo there is birth lottery, but in the status quo right now, medical is already advanced. It's not like in the 90s where there is no 4G ultrasonography, for example. Right now, we already have pre-screening tests before you are conceiving. You can check whether whether you bring a defect gene, which can prevent the baby from excessively suffering. In the status quo right now, when a doctor see that you have high risk of pregnancy or your baby has anencephaly, which means that the baby is born without a head, they will offer you to go for abortion. They will explain to you what are the risks in the future, what will they face in the future, and what are the treatment good for them. So the parents understand. The fact that you have birth lottery doesn't mean that your life is dictated and you will suffer, because right now schools are welcoming handicapped person. Just because there's birth lottery doesn't mean that you cannot choose what treatment you want, right? For example, like now Down syndrome have their own treatment and therapy, and they also brought an example about deafness. They forgot that right now there's a hearing device for deafness, right? As a doctor, we do not deny them and have the obligation to provide all treatments. We have the obligation to tell them all of the treatments course available. Right now, we also already have option to increase their quality of life. So it's fine to let it be. There is even cochlear implant if they want to for deafness. We don't need false sense of hope saying that all birth defects are bad and need to be cured. This correlates to my first and second speaker arguments, which is about the exclusivity of our side. Under our side is that we have social movement that support these issues. We have campaigns about rare diseases and no bullying to handicapped person and whatsoever. We normalize that humans are variables, that human differs and what makes them unique. And that's why it is okay to be who you are. They hasn't been able to prove why is it okay if in the worst case scenario, people go for Eurocentric standards. And why is it okay if there are no variety? And why is it okay to stop this social movement? So we say that point about our social movement still stands. But last, they talk about innovation in a long argument. We say that under their side, innovation is not going to happen because we're talking about a device from another planet, which the material might not be exist in Earth. They need to stop playing at their best case scenario where our world is a lovey-dovey place. Let's bite their bullet and go with their side. Innovation happens. Who has the capital and the capability to make the device? Engineer, who has the capability to hire engineer and scientists? Big pharma companies, right? They will focus on imitating the same device and leave other medicines as COVID drugs or others to develop, because this device is more lucrative. We have told you that the device is bad because you need to be in a long waiting list and make society forget that there are other alternatives such as conventional drugs. So instead of demanding, they would rather go in the waiting list. If this happens, if pharma companies doesn't see that other drugs are if conventional drugs are not lucrative and doesn't need demand, production will decrease, right? And drug will become scarce. And at the end of the day, it's going to create inflation, like how insulin is very expensive in the US because it is been monopolized by one pharma companies. But even if pharma companies do success in imitating it, we say that comparing it to our side, innovation will be better because companies knows many things. Companies do research many things that they do as lucrative. For example, like mRNA, it is from agriculture, but you can use it in vaccine because you're experimenting on many sections. Under our side, people will keep experimenting, and scientists will be more appreciated and they have more motivation to go in for research for 20 years and whatsoever. That is why talking about innovation is going to be good on our side for the problem.
The third speaker of the government team spent 7 minutes and 26 seconds. To close the case of the opposition team, I would like to call upon the third speaker of the opposition team. Mr. Brian, time is yours.
Check. Making sure my voice is loud and clear.
Yes, you are.
Okay. My gender pronouns is he or hen, and if you would like to give POI, just unmute yourself. Wait, I will set my timer. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I will answer and explain two main theses in this debate. Number one, if I can prove to you that whether or not this company will be monopolized will likely them for you to monopolize this device. I think this is what the most the government always champion in the first place. And second of all, I would like to prove that how we can change the status quo and help the people. Let's see the responses and the promises coming from government. Number one, they told you that we want the status quo that is a presence of technology and development and incentivize. It's a very evil proposal. Why? Number one, the result in the status quo, people like when they have Down syndrome or other genetic things or disease, for instance, is cannot be cured, and there is no certainty until nowadays, ladies and gentlemen. This is how the trust towards the research are less, and this is how people don't even care with research because they cannot give the certainty itself. So what we will give to society, of course, we will give the false hope, like, oh, we will do the research, we can solve the problem like 10 years, but the result is never happen like exist in the status quo. This is why we would not give more pressure towards their person. Second of all, they told you that alien have no accountability, and there is a presence of clinical trial. Alien can be from the gut or even other things, ladies and gentlemen. This is not specifically the motion say, ladies and gentlemen. And also clinical trial. When this device handled by international body, we say the security is still there because, of course, in our mechanism, we already told you that we will share it towards the public, so there will be check and balances. Just talking about the security is a deadlock and happens on both sides, and we say and clinical trial about security, or even there is people caused by clinical trial, it happens on government or either opposition, they are likely from our side or their side, will make people die. So I think that is a deadlock. It's something that exclusive you cannot buy from the government side of the house. So thirdly, they told you that average doctor like demonopolization, like big pharmaceutical industry or company. If I can open this deadlock, I think the whole case of the government will down, because this is exactly what they champion. Number one, we say that won't happen, and I think the government doesn't know the characteristics of the company, the characteristics of these people. Of course, they are money oriented. What is the interest for you as a company? Is it making sure that you make sure that all of your customers will be dependent and always come back to you, ladies and gentlemen? That's how the status quo works in the status quo. Like, for instance, you produce a lotion or even medicines, even though you know that I will give them optimum dosage, but we would like later we'll give like not optimum dosage, so they can make the customer buy again and again, create the dependency towards for the customers towards the company itself. We say even if you would like to monopolize, I think the company will rational enough and reject this. Why? Because when you use this device, you won't like to monopolize this, means you make people already perfect, means that they will backlash with your interest as a company, means that you cannot even gain more money, ladies and gentlemen. This is why exactly the monopolization will not exist, because it backlash with the interest of the company. Not that you don't have enough chance, for instance, to monopolize this, and then as a doctor, then you have a moral obligation to cure people. You don't have any intention to oppress these people. This is my previous speaker told you about the characteristic of the doctor later, or even backlash your interest as a doctor themselves. This is why my previous characterizations will stand and more likely have happened. And they seem continuously demonize the portrayal of pharmaceutical institution, even though we got our vaccines in the first place. We think that even though they have monetary incentive in order to get monetary gain in the first place, of course they will share your secure, make it accessible as we can see in the status quo. Lastly, what we heard in the first class is that only one device the research, and they cannot even more likely in our side of the house cannot do the research. We say no. Let's answer it one by one. See in the status quo. Number one, research are left behind, less funded because of the technology is not giving certainty to a society, to the society. Even if the status quo, like we can create vaccines, but it can cure all types of vaccines. In the moment when there is genetic is changed, there is a variant Delta, Alpha, or other things, it also needs other vaccines. This is how you can. There are no research can even cure all the diseases. Number one, second, this trust for the people are really bad when people are dying out of there waiting for the innovation, and then you cannot give the certainty towards these people as a whole, which is to say that it will slow the progress for the government. It's like what is most likely in the scenario in the government. We say when you see this advanced technology, you will try to learn from elitism. And in the moment you think that this device can even cure tons of diseases, so this can be a head start for our research itself. Comparison on the government side of the house, they will worsen the scenario, slowing down the research. This is how the innovation of research still exists on our side of the house. Before I move to my second class, yes, please. 3, 2. Yeah.
As a company, when you have only one device and only one device only, now there is a rich dying people who can pay you as a company $100,000.
Okay, I'll get your point. I will answer
who
that
cannot pay you at all. Who will
class.
give you, considering you say they're capitalistic.
Yes, sure. Second class, we'll be talking about how you can change the status quo and help the people. This is like what they are trying to do. Campaign. Number one, they said that there is only one device and only people be privileged. This is what exactly what UPOI, right? So, but then they also say that there is a reason the status quo can be used by all people, and then they mention that all rich people will fund this. I think this is backlash in the very first place. Why? In the moment when they mention that this will be funded by rich people, this is exactly why in the status quo when they are just only would like to give this device only for the privileged people. This is how exactly poor people cannot afford. And second of all, they told you that you would like to pursue becoming rich or becoming the head of the hospital, for instance. That's exactly as an average doctor, you have an experiences to think and measure the side effects or know how if the patients complain when you don't give a good treatment, for instance. Which is going to be the interest. We say it's going to be that interest at all. Due to it will give more burden for you as a doctor. You will be the one who will blame all the causes of the side effects over this. So I don't think so that this doctor will be monopolized or even utilize this for the personal interest itself. And judge through giving this international body, it means that it will increase their fame and their interest as a doctor to be seen as a safer, not just one who will utilize these things for their personal interest. So they champion about what about people would like access there is a capital, you can't even afford the plane, etc. and so forth. I'm talking about the time sensitivity. That's in the status quo, we say the presence of research or access only in the first world country, only in the developed country, or in the very advanced technology. So it's a develop, it happens in our side of the house or even their side of the house. It's not something the exclusivity that you can buy from the government, but it will be better in our side of the house when the things can raise the hope from the society, help more people, because it won't work it can work hand in hand with the research. So I think that our research under our side, because there is a standard uphold, and at least there is you can refer to the nothing at all. Government needs to engage this, but they never. Lastly, talking about the abnormalities people, how many numbers people can come out in the society? Even if you are eat that privilege, you are educated. Even in the very best case scenario, these people can come out. The society still oppress you anyway. They mentioned that it will backlash with the progressivity and also diversity. Our mechanism is clear that we will conduct international bodies, so we will announce and not misuse this, and just only we never force you to change your own skin. And lastly, but even in a very worst case scenario, like have to change, I think at least on our side of the house, we can give the hope, we can give the happiness for you to change due to because you are still oppressed in the status quo. And lastly, people are still rational. In the moment you change your skill as ex-Asian or ex-Black African American, this not solve the problem in the status quo. Oppression is still there. So we think that this is not something that they can champion. We're proud to oppose.
The third speaker of the opposition team spent 7 minutes and 23 seconds. Now, to close the debate, I would like to call upon the reply speaker from the opposition team. To Ms. Sydney, time is yours.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are, Miss.
Okay. Okay, I'll start in, oh, wait a minute, let me set my timer. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Judges, at the end of the day, which side wins this debate is the side that actually solves the proposes a solution to those who face genetic defects, to those who currently are suffering from these conditions we have portrayed to you, right? When you are faced with a solution, which is this device, you don't destroy it. All of government side of the house arguments are based on the premise that, oh, there are going to be this kind of journey of trying to strive for accessibility and this kind of monopoly, right? But at the end of the day, this is still a solution that will exist under our world. Hence, we think that is justified for its existence in the first place, right? Two clashes in this debate. First, a clash on justification, accessibility, and monopoly. Government side of the house tries to tell you that because there's only one device and tells you there will be monopoly, hence it won't be accessible, right? How we've responded to this is that firstly, we've told you that innovation exists. How research works is that there is one grand thing and you try to make it accessible. No analysis on why this won't happen within the research community. No analysis on why academia won't try to research about this new genetic device and try to create the goodness from this device, right? No explanation on why the academia will not gain anything and will not be able to get this device propagated. But then secondly, we told you what's most likely to happen is that these issues will end up at international bodies to provide regulations. These kinds of technology are going to be regulated. This is exactly why their kind of dystopia about designer babies is an ongoing discussion, right? We think that those kinds of check and balances exist. We don't think it's fair for them to say that, oh, there will be only this one device and the world will end, right? But then second explanation they provide you is about pharma companies. Judges, they never explain to you why pharma companies are that bad in the first place, rather than giving you the insulin example, right? They seem to forget that the COVID vaccine, Moderna itself, comes from a company, right? We don't think that this is the kind of reason that you can use to justify destroying a device that can save lives. But then how do we respond about monetary gain, right? Exactly, they need to sell those things in order to gain money, but let's play in government sides of a demonization scenario in which these pharmaceutical companies are that bad. It's still better under our side, because then even if only 50 people are being cured, that's 50 more people being cured from genetic diseases, rather in status quo in which all of these people die. But then we only prove to you that exactly companies would like to do continuous profit, then they will regret this, because it will close your profit and your interest, and it won't happen. They can't say that, oh, this will be only one device, and say that companies will want this, right? But then third response about accessibility, about how they say materials don't exist. We think that this is very assumptive, and the motion does not specifically say about this. We think that's a fiat that government cannot make. But then even if there's only one device and it is very limited, we've given you the philosophical justification of how you still have the obligation to save that one life. You still have the obligation to provide that solution to the patient in front of you. That if you have a solution, it is never justified for you to reject the solution. Moving on to our second clash on research and innovation, right? What they essentially tell you is that this is very dangerous. No, we've characterized to you that research in itself also stems from the unknown. You have to start from things that you don't know in order to actually do something. This is how every single drug research starts. But why then will it be better under our side of the house? At least under our side, there's something that can help people while research is still ongoing and not sufficient to solve those urgent problems. We gave you extensive examples on this, on how genetic essentially can ruin lives, right? But also research will be better under our side of the house because there's a certain goal to reach. There's something to refer to. You need there is this perfect device that research should aim, and hence very proud to oppose.
The reply speaker of the opposition team spent 4 minutes and 11 seconds. To close the case from the government team, I would like to call upon the reply speaker from the government team. To Ms. Kelly, time is yours.
Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, one. Such a shame that many of their responses only come in their third and reply speaker, right? Where in which government side of the house no longer have the chance to respond to them. I hope that as an adjudicator that you would eliminate this particular arguments, as we do not have the opportunity to respond to this. Now, I will divide this debate into three classes, right? Firstly, let's talk about the biggest point of this debate, which I think is accessibility, right? Their biggest argument coming from their side of the house is that if we can help these people with certain genetic defects or diseases, then we should help them, right? That's the biggest argument coming from their side of the house. What do we tell you? We tell you that we already tried to help them in the current status quo. We are living in the 21st century where there is so many incentive from the government, many grants, many scholarship in order to incentivize more and more research that can practically cure almost all kind of diseases, almost all kind of cancers, right? But secondly, we also told you that they can live a good life with or without this particular disease because they learn to adapt, right? They learn to make the best out of their situations. But thirdly, we also told you that most of these babies with very, very severe genetic defects has been aborted by the parents even before they are born. But fourth and lastly, right, even if some people have to die because of their disease and they do not access this particular medicine, we think that it's okay because we told you that disease is a natural course, death is a natural course of life, and it is a proper trade-off for two things, right? The protection of the poor people who are the most vulnerable, and secondly, we also talk about innovations. Now, the moment we can prove to you that this device cannot help all the people the way they say, I think that the winning should go to the government side of the house, right? Now we're going to prove to you why they cannot actually help people the way they told you they could, right? Because firstly, we told you that this device is limited only in one location. Because in the motion, in the motion itself, the wording say a device, which we can safely assume there's only one device. Why can it be replicated, right? Because most likely this technology is made with alien technology, something that doesn't exist in our particular universe, ladies and gentlemen. That is why it is almost impossible for it to be replicated. And if pharma companies even try, they're just going to waste the time they could use for other research and innovation, right? The only response coming from the third speaker says that under our side, some drugs might not also be accessible only in developed country and not in developing countries, right? Such a shame it came out in the third speaker, but thank God we have preempted it in our speech by saying that most drugs can be multiplicated before the disease happen, right? And being sent all over the world. Why so? Because these drugs are not made with alien technologies. These drugs are made with proper clinical trials, with proper clearance, and most likely can be accessed by the whole world because of its ability to be replicated, unlike this device, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, right, when we talk about accessibility, we also should characterize the people who could actually access this, right? Under their side of the house, only the rich people can access it. Why? Because firstly, they can pay this capitalistic doctor or capitalistic company to be on top of the waiting list. We told you many reasons why it's likely for doctors to be capitalistic, right? First, their own wants to, after finishing 4 years of medical school, to not just be average, but to be rich. No response coming to this. We told you how they might do this out of their love for their family because they want to give their family a good life. No response to this. We told you how some doctors are just a maleficent and just wants to just only care about themselves. No response to this, right? Or the only response saying is this is an outlier, ladies and gentlemen. But what if this one doctor is that evil? Can you imagine what evil it can be with this such a powerful tool? But secondly, right, let's talk about technicalities. Traveling half across the world to access this is not something that everyone can access. Only the most rich can do so, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why under their side, they do not protect the most poor and vulnerable people. But lastly, right, when I want to talk about how there is check and balance in its operation, we don't think so because we told you that most likely only the rich people will silence the poor people whenever they try to protest about this. But also furthermore, these poor people doesn't even have that much leverage to begin with, right? Hence, we think that it wouldn't be effective. But secondly, right, let's talk about future innovation. Innovation is better on our side. Why? Because there will be rich people who push for the government to do this. There will be rich people who wants to sponsor this, ladies and gentlemen. Under our side, these rich people can sponsor for a drug that later can be used for everyone. So I think that at the end of the day, if the trade-off is for the greater good, then under a utilitarian principle, doing so is justified because if not, we will continue to discriminate and to subjugate the poor people in our side of the house. Very proud to propose.
The reply speaker of the government team spent 4 minutes and 27 seconds. We now have reached the end of the debate. The adjudicators will deliberate the winner of the competition, and I will now close the grand final debate and the results will be announced at the end of the event. Thank you for your participation and best of luck to all debaters.
you for the debate.
Thank you for the debate, guys.
Thank you for the debate, everyone.
Thank you for the debate.
Thank you, everyone.
Yay! Hello, everyone. Congratulations for finishing your grand final round. Okay, so guys, the competition result will be announced at the end of today's event after the farewell party, so make sure to attend the whole event. Please